The lecture hall of the Galactic Academy of Xenobiology stretched wide like the inside of a massive shell. Thousands of seats rose in curved rows toward a domed ceiling that showed a live feed of distant stars. Today, every seat was filled with students from dozens of different species. They had come from across the galaxy to study at this famous school. Professor Crix Vallon stood at the center of the hall. She was a tall being from the Velorian species. Her skin was pale blue and smooth like polished stone. 4 eyes blinked independently as she looked out at her students. Long fingers clicked against the data tablet she held. "Today we begin our most important unit," she said. Her voice carried easily through the hall thanks to the acoustic design. "The study of apex predators." A ripple of interest passed through the crowd. This was what many students had been waiting for. The study of apex predators was considered the most dangerous and fascinating topic in all of xenobiology. "We will focus on one species in particular," Professor Crix Vallon continued. "A species that has confused our scientists for over 300 cycles. A species that does not fit our models of predator behavior." She pressed a button on her tablet. A holographic image appeared above the stage. It showed a creature standing on 2 legs. It had no claws, no fangs, no thick armor. Its skin looked soft and vulnerable. 2 eyes faced forward in a round head covered with strange fibers. "Humans," the professor said. Several students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The Dravex student in the front row, a being with 4 arms and scales covering his body, raised his hand. "Professor, surely there is some mistake," he said. "Humans cannot be apex predators. They have no natural weapons. Their young require years of care before independence. They cannot even survive moderate changes in temperature." Professor Crix Vallon's 4 eyes focused on the student. "Thank you, Torx9, for demonstrating exactly why we must study this species. You have made the same mistake that our scientists made for generations. You have looked only at physical traits." She gestured at the hologram, which began to show humans in various environments. Humans in thick clothing walking across frozen landscapes. Humans with almost no clothing surviving in hot deserts. Humans swimming in deep water. Humans climbing mountains. "Humans are persistence predators," the professor explained. "They do not hunt like other apex species. They do not rely on speed or strength or venom. They hunt through endurance. They track their prey for hours, sometimes days, until the prey simply cannot run anymore." A small insectoid student from the back called out a question through her translation device. "How can such a slow species catch faster prey?" "Excellent question, Zizzy-Click," the professor said. "The answer lies in their remarkable cooling system, human sweat. This allows them to regulate their body temperature while running for extended periods. Most prey animals must stop to cool down through panting. Humans do not need to stop. They simply keep coming." The hologram changed to show a human male running across an African savanna. It was a recording from Earth, captured by a hidden observation drone. The human was following a large 4-legged animal with horns. "Watch carefully," Professor Crix Vallon said. The students observed as the human jogged at a steady pace. Not fast, but constant. The horned animal would sprint away, disappearing over hills, but always the human would appear again, following the tracks. Hour after hour, the chase continued. Finally, the horned animal simply collapsed. Its body had overheated. It could not run anymore. The human walked up to it calmly and killed it with a sharpened stick. "This is persistence hunting in its purest form," the professor said. The human did not need claws or fangs. It needed only endurance and the ability to track its prey. Torx9, the Dravex student, looked disturbed. "But Professor, any species could develop such a strategy if they were simply patient." "Could they?" Professor Crix Vallon asked. "Let us examine the requirements. First, bipedal movement that allows for efficient long-distance travel. Second, a cooling system that permits extended physical activity. Third, the cognitive ability to track prey over long distances and time periods. Fourth, the social structure to share hunting techniques across generations. Fifth, and perhaps most importantly, the psychological drive to never give up. She let those words hang in the air. We have studied over 4,000 species across the known galaxy, she continued. Only 7 have demonstrated persistent hunting behaviors. Of those 7, only one has successfully used this strategy to become the dominant life form on their planet: humans. A Valorian student, one of the professor's own species, raised a tentative hand. "Professor, you said humans have confused our scientists. What exactly do you mean?" Professor Crixvalon's 4 eyes closed briefly in what might have been amusement or concern. "Our models predicted that humans would remain a minor species on their world. They had too many disadvantages. Their planet was hostile, filled with faster and stronger predators. Their bodies were fragile. Their reproductive rate was slow. Every calculation suggested they would either go extinct or remain a small population in their original habitat." She pulled up new data on the hologram. Maps showing human populations spread across Earth over thousands of years. Instead, they spread to every corner of their world. They survived ice ages. They survived supervolcanoes. They survived plagues that killed significant portions of their population. And they did not merely survive. They thrived. They adapted. They invented. The next image showed humans in strange artificial environments: underwater habitats, space stations, bases on their planet's moon and neighboring worlds. Within the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, they went from hunting with sharpened sticks to building machines that could carry them between worlds. They did not evolve to survive in space. They built systems to bring their ideal conditions with them. Professor Crixvalon set down her data tablet and clasped her long fingers together. "This is what separates humans from other apex predators. Most apex species are specialists. They are perfectly evolved for their specific environment and role. Humans are generalists. They adapt to any environment because they adapt the environment to themselves." She paused, letting the students absorb this information. "Over the next 10 sessions, you will study human persistence and adaptation in detail. You will learn why the Galactic Council classified Earth as a Category 7 restricted world. You will learn why contact with humans is limited to specially trained diplomatic teams. And you will learn why some scientists believe humans represent the most significant development in predatory evolution in galactic history." A nervous murmur spread through the lecture hall. Category 7 was the highest restriction level. It was reserved for planets with species that posed potential threats to galactic civilization. "Your assignment for next session," the professor concluded, "is to read the primary observation logs from the first contact incident. Pay particular attention to how the human delegation responded to unexpected challenges. Note their emotional responses and compare them to our models of apex predator behavior." As students began to file out of the lecture hall, many of them were talking quietly among themselves. The image of that human running across the savannah stayed in their minds. That patient, relentless pursuit. That refusal to stop until the prey had given up. Torx 9 lingered behind, staring at the now empty holographic display. His scales had turned a slightly darker shade, a sign of deep thought among his species. "Something troubles you?" Professor Crixvalon asked. "The human in that recording," Torx 9 said slowly. "After all those hours of running, after finally catching its prey, it was smiling." Professor Crixvalon's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Yes, we have found that humans often experience what they call joy from the act of persistent pursuit. They do not merely tolerate the chase. They enjoy it." Torx 9's scales darkened further. "That seems concerning." "It is," the professor agreed. "It very much is." 3 cycles later, the students gathered again in the great lecture hall. This time, the mood was different. Many of them had completed the assigned reading, and their conversations were quieter, more thoughtful. Some students looked nervous. A few looked fascinated. 1 or 2 looked like they had not slept since the last session. Professor Crixvalon took her place at the center of the hall. Today, she was accompanied by a guest. The being beside her was unlike any species the students had seen before. It had a compact body covered in dense brown fur, 4 legs, and a long snout. Its eyes were dark and alert. "Before we continue our discussion," the professor said, "I want to introduce a special guest. This is Companion Unit 12, a canine of Earth origin. Canines are one of several species that humans have formed cooperative relationships with." The canine sat calmly beside the professor. Its tail moved slowly back and forth. "Humans call this animal a dog," Professor Crixvalon explained. "Approximately 15,000 Earth years ago, humans began a process of selective breeding with the wolf, a predator native to their world. Through generations of careful selection, they created the domestic dog. This species now assists humans in hunting, protection, herding, emotional support, and countless other tasks." Zizzy Click, the insectoid student, raised a limb. "Professor, you said humans selectively bred these creatures. Does that mean they modified another species to serve their purposes?" "Precisely," the professor said. "And dogs are merely one example. Humans have done this with hundreds of species on their world. Plants that produce more food, animals that provide labor or materials, even microscopic organisms that perform useful chemical processes." She gestured at the calm dog beside her. "What you see here is the result of human persistence applied to genetic modification. They did not simply accept the species around them. They changed those species to better serve human needs. This is adaptation at a level we rarely see in nature." The dog yawned, showing a row of sharp teeth. Despite its peaceful demeanor, several students shifted uncomfortably at the sight. "Now," Professor Crixvalon continued, "let us discuss your assigned reading, the first contact incident. Who would like to begin?" For a moment, no one responded. Then a young crystalline student named Prism 7 raised one of its faceted appendages. The crystalline were known for their logical thinking and emotional detachment. "I found the human behavior during first contact to be unexpected," Prism 7 said. "According to the logs, when our diplomatic vessel first appeared above their planet, humans experienced widespread fear and panic. This was predictable. However, their response to this fear was not." "Explain," the professor said. "Rather than fleeing or hiding, which would be the logical response to a perceived superior threat, humans immediately began preparing to fight. They armed their primitive weapons. They organized their military forces. They were preparing to resist an invasion that they had no logical chance of winning." "And what do you conclude from this behavior?" Professor Crixvalon asked. Prism 7's crystalline body shifted colors slightly. "I conclude that humans do not have a proper fear response. They are defective in their self-preservation instincts." Several students nodded in agreement, but the professor shook her head slowly. "You have made an error that is common among species that have never faced an uncertain universe," she said. "You assume that the logical response to an overwhelming threat is submission or flight. But consider this. For most of human history, they faced overwhelming threats daily. Predators larger and faster than themselves. Diseases they could not see or understand. Natural disasters they could not predict or control." She pulled up historical images on the hologram. Humans fighting massive animals with simple spears. Humans building shelters during violent storms. Humans caring for sick members of their group. If humans had developed a proper fear response, they would have gone extinct long ago. Instead, they developed something different. When faced with a threat, their first instinct is not to ask, "Can I win?" Their first instinct is to ask, "How can I make this threat sorry it ever challenged me?" The lecture hall was very quiet. This is the psychological adaptation that makes humans unique among apex predators, Professor Crixvalon said. They do not calculate odds of success before deciding to fight. They decide to fight, and then they calculate how to succeed. The order of operations is reversed from what we would consider rational. Torx 9 raised his hand. But Professor, surely this leads to unnecessary deaths. Surely they must sometimes fight battles they cannot win. They do, the professor agreed. Human history is filled with examples of small groups fighting against impossible odds. Sometimes they lose, often, in fact. But here is the crucial detail that our scientists initially missed. Even when they lose, they often inflict enough damage that the winning side reconsiders future conflicts. She pulled up a new image. It showed a primitive human battle scene, where a small group defended a narrow passage against a much larger force. This image depicts an event from human history called the Battle of Thermopylae. A small force of human warriors fought against an invasion army many times their size. The small force was eventually destroyed. By any rational measure they lost, but their resistance was so fierce, so costly to the invaders, that it became a symbol of human defiance. Thousands of years later, humans still tell stories about this battle. They still celebrate the warriors who died fighting an unwinnable war. She let the image fade. When our diplomatic vessel appeared above Earth, she continued, the humans had no way of knowing our intentions were peaceful. They had no way of knowing that we were far more technologically advanced than them. All they knew was that an unknown threat had appeared, and their response was automatic. Prepare to fight, make the enemy pay for every inch of ground. The crystalline student Prism 7 spoke again. This seems dangerously irrational. How have they not destroyed themselves? An excellent question, and one that brings us to our next topic, human social structures and their relationship to persistence and adaptation. Professor Crixvalon gestured, and new images appeared. Humans working together to build massive structures. Humans sharing food. Humans caring for injured members of their group. Humans are intensely social creatures. Despite their individual willingness to fight against impossible odds, they rarely act alone. They form bonds with other humans that are remarkably strong. They form bonds with other species as well. She looked down at the dog beside her, which had fallen asleep during the lecture. Companion Unit 12 is an example of this bonding tendency. Humans did not simply breed wolves into useful tools. They formed emotional connections with these animals. They consider dogs to be members of their family groups. They mourn when their dogs die. This bonding behavior extends to many species, including several that are actually dangerous to humans. A student in the middle rows called out, "Professor, you said humans bond with dangerous species. How is that possible?" Humans have a psychological trait that our scientists call social adoption, the professor explained. They can extend their protective instincts beyond their own species. This is why humans will risk their lives to rescue animals that have no practical value to them. This is why humans will adopt predators that could kill them and treat these predators as beloved companions. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. This trait is directly connected to their predatory nature. Humans are apex predators who have learned to incorporate other species into their hunting groups. But unlike other cooperative predator species, humans do not limit this cooperation to hunting. They extend it to all aspects of their lives. The sleeping dog woke suddenly, its ears perking up. A moment later, a door at the side of the lecture hall opened. A human walked in. Every student in the hall went still. The human was smaller than most of the students had expected. It was dressed in simple clothing that covered most of its body. Its eyes were brown and alert, and they swept across the hall with a quick, assessing look that made several students want to hide. "Ah," Professor Crixvalon said. "Allow me to introduce our second guest. This is Dr. Maria Chen, a human xenobiologist who has agreed to participate in our class." The human walked to the center of the hall. Her movements were smooth and efficient. The dog immediately moved to walk beside her, its tail wagging with obvious joy. "Hello, everyone," Dr. Chen said. Her voice was pleasant, but there was something in her eyes that the students could not quite identify. "I understand you've been learning about my species. I'm here to answer any questions you might have." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Torxnine raised a scaled hand. "I have a question," he said. "In all my reading about human history, I have noticed a pattern. When humans face a problem they cannot solve, they often try to solve it anyway. They spend generations working on problems that seem impossible. Why?" Dr. Chen smiled. It was a small expression, but it transformed her face in a way that was both fascinating and unsettling. "Because we know that impossible is just a word," she said. "Everything is impossible until someone does it. We went from being prey animals on a dangerous planet to standing among the stars in less than a few thousand generations. Every step of that journey involved solving impossible problems." She looked around the lecture hall, meeting the eyes of as many students as she could. "We don't give up," she said simply. "It's not in our nature. When something is hard, we try harder. When something seems impossible, we get creative. And when we fail," she paused. "When we fail, we learn and we try again. That's what makes us human." The lecture hall was silent. The students were beginning to understand something that their textbooks could not fully convey. Humans were not dangerous because of any single trait. They were dangerous because of how all their traits combined: the persistence, the adaptation, the refusal to accept defeat, the social bonds that turned individual humans into coordinated groups. And underneath it all, that smile. That quiet confidence that said no matter how bad things got, no matter how overwhelming the odds, there was always a chance, always a way forward, always hope. Professor Crix Vallon cleared her throat. "I believe we have much more to discuss. Dr. Chen will be joining us for the remainder of our unit on human behavior. I suggest you prepare your questions carefully." As the students began to talk among themselves, the professor noticed something interesting. Despite their fear, despite their knowledge of human predatory nature, several students had moved closer to the front of the hall. They were drawn toward the human, curious despite themselves. The professor smiled, or made the Velorian equivalent of a smile. Humans, it seemed, had already begun to work their persistent magic on her students. The simulation chamber was the most advanced facility in the academy. Its walls could create any environment from any world in the known galaxy. Today, it had been programmed to recreate the African savanna of Earth, circa 100,000 years ago. Professor Crix Vallon stood at the observation window with her students arranged around her. Below them, the chamber showed a vast grassland under a bright yellow sun. In the distance, a herd of large plant-eating animals grazed peacefully. "Today's exercise is observation," the professor said. "Dr. Chen has agreed to demonstrate human persistence hunting techniques. You will observe and record everything you see. Pay particular attention to her psychological state throughout the hunt." Dr. Maria Chen stood in the simulation chamber wearing minimal clothing. She had explained that this was historically accurate for persistence hunters, who needed maximum ability to cool their bodies. In her hand, she held a simple spear with a stone point. "I should mention," Dr. Chen said through the communication system, "that I haven't done this in years. We call it persistence hunting in academic papers, but traditional hunters called it running them down. It's one of the oldest human hunting techniques." "You have done this before?" Professor Crix Vallon asked. "I spent 2 years living with a traditional hunting community in southern Africa," Dr. Chen said. "They still practice these techniques. It was the most educational experience of my life." She took a deep breath and looked at the distant herd. Even through the observation window, the students could see something change in her eyes. She became focused in a way that made several of them uncomfortable. "The key is to choose your target," she said. "Usually, you pick an animal that looks slightly sick or slightly old, something that might have slightly less endurance. Then you start the chase." She began to jog toward the herd. Her pace was relaxed, almost casual. The simulated animals noticed her approach and began to move away. They did not run with full speed. They had evolved to conserve energy by running only as fast as necessary to escape immediate danger. "She is not trying to catch them," Torx9 observed. "She is barely jogging." "Watch," Professor Crixvalon said. Dr. Chen kept moving. The herd kept retreating. For the first hour, nothing seemed to change. The students grew restless. This was not the dramatic hunt they had expected. But Professor Crixvalon watched carefully, and she saw something that most of her students missed. Dr. Chen was tracking. Every time the herd moved, she noted where they went. Every time they stopped, she used the opportunity to close some distance. She was patient, methodical, relentless. "Notice her breathing," the professor said. "It remains steady. Her body temperature remains stable despite the heat. She has been moving continuously for over an hour, and she shows no signs of fatigue." This caught the students' attention. They began to look more carefully at the sensor data being displayed alongside the visual feed. Dr. Chen's vital signs were remarkably stable. Her heart rate was elevated but not extreme. Her body temperature was actually lower than when she started, thanks to the evaporative cooling of her sweat. "Her target is the large male in the center of the herd," Professor Crixvalon pointed out. "She has been slowly separating him from the others. Notice how she adjusts her direction each time the herd moves, always pushing him slightly away from the group." The students watched with growing interest as the hours passed. Dr. Chen maintained her steady pace. She drank water from a container at her hip. She ate small portions of dried food, but she never stopped moving. By the fourth hour, the large male was clearly struggling. He was panting heavily, his body unable to cool efficiently. He kept trying to return to the herd, but Dr. Chen was always there, cutting him off, pushing him in a different direction. "She is not hunting him," Prism 7 said suddenly. "She is hurting him. She is using his fear and exhaustion to control his movements." "Correct," Professor Crixvalon said. "This is why humans domesticated so many species. They understand how to manipulate animal behavior. They understand psychology at an instinctive level." By the sixth hour, the male could barely walk. His legs were shaking. He was overheating, his body temperature reaching dangerous levels. Dr. Chen approached him slowly, still jogging, still relentless. And then she stopped. She stood perhaps 30 feet from the exhausted animal and simply watched him. The male looked at her with eyes that showed something like despair. He had been running for 6 hours. He had given everything he had, and his pursuer was barely breathing hard. "This is the moment," Professor Crixvalon said quietly. Dr. Chen walked forward calmly. The male tried to run, but his legs gave out. He collapsed on the grass, panting desperately. Dr. Chen approached and placed a hand on his flank. "In a real hunt," her voice came through the speakers, "this is where I would make the kill, quick and clean. The animal has already suffered enough, but I think we've demonstrated the principle." She looked up at the observation window. "The important thing to understand is that this wasn't about physical superiority. That animal was bigger than me, stronger than me, faster than me in every way. But I had one advantage that he could never match. I can regulate my body temperature while moving. I can just keep going until he can't." She paused, and her expression became thoughtful. "Humans evolved for this. We lost our body hair to improve cooling. We developed sweat glands all over our bodies. We evolved long legs and efficient joints for walking and running. Our brains developed the ability to track prey over long distances and long time periods. Every part of human evolution was optimized for one thing: outlasting our prey." Professor Crix Vallon addressed her students. Do you understand now why humans are classified as apex predators despite lacking natural weapons? Torx 9 raised his hand slowly. Professor, this demonstration has shown us how humans hunt, but how does this relate to their behavior as a technological species? They no longer need to chase animals for hours. An excellent question, the professor said. Dr. Chen, would you care to respond? The simulation chamber deactivated, returning to its neutral gray state. Dr. Chen walked out through a side door and joined the group at the observation window. She had put on more clothing and was toweling sweat from her face. The instinct doesn't go away just because we don't need it for hunting anymore, she said. Humans apply persistence to everything we do. Science, art, technology, relationships. When we set our minds on something, we pursue it with the same relentless determination our ancestors used to chase animals across the savannah. She looked at the students, her brown eyes moving from face to face. Do you know how long it took humans to develop powered flight? Centuries. Generation after generation of humans tried to fly and failed. They died. They were mocked. They were called fools, but they kept trying, because giving up simply wasn't in our nature. Zizzy Click, the insectoid student, made a clicking sound that her translator rendered as curiosity. But surely, there were many humans who did give up. Not all humans can be equally persistent. True, Dr. Chen admitted. Not all individuals are equally persistent, but our culture rewards persistence. Our stories celebrate those who refuse to give up. Our most admired heroes are usually those who faced impossible odds and kept fighting anyway. Even when individual humans falter, our collective culture pushes us forward. Professor Crix Vallon took over the discussion. This is a crucial point. Human persistence is not merely biological, it is cultural. They have built their entire civilization around the principle of never giving up. Their religions often emphasize perseverance in the face of suffering. Their economic systems reward those who keep trying even after failure. Their educational systems train children to see obstacles as challenges to overcome, not barriers to accept. She brought up new data on a nearby display screen. Consider this statistic. In human history, the average number of failures before a successful invention or discovery is 17. 17 attempts. Most other species would abandon a project after 2 or 3 failures. Humans try 17 times on average before succeeding. And if they don't succeed after 17 attempts, Torx 9 asked. Dr. Chen smiled that unsettling smile again. Then they try an 18th time, or a 19th, or they pass the problem to the next generation who try another 17 times. We have projects that have been ongoing for centuries, problems that we've been working on for thousands of years. We don't give up, we just take breaks. A heavy silence fell over the group. The implications were sinking in. This is why the Galactic Council is concerned about humans, Professor Crix Vallon said finally. They have existed as a technological species for barely a few thousand years. In that time, they have gone from stone tools to interstellar travel. They have solved problems that older species said could not be solved, and they show no signs of slowing down. She paused, her 4 eyes fixed on some distant point. Our scientists estimate that at their current rate of advancement, humans will reach technological parity with the most advanced species in the galaxy within the next 500 cycles. And they will not stop there. They will keep pushing, keep adapting, keep persisting. What happens then? Prism 7 asked. Professor Crix Vallon did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Dr. Chen, who had been listening quietly. That's the question, isn't it? Dr. Chen said softly. What happens when the persistence hunters finally catch up with the rest of the galaxy? What happens when the apex predators from a Category 7 world are no longer held back by their limited technology? She did not offer an answer, but her eyes held something that might have been hope or might have been warning. The students filed out of the observation area slowly, their minds full of new information and new fears. The simulation of the African savanna had been deactivated, but they could still imagine it. The endless grassland, the blazing sun, and somewhere in that landscape a human, running, always running, never stopping until they caught their prey. The final session of the Apex Predator Unit was held in the Academy's main auditorium. Every xenobiology student was required to attend, which meant nearly 5,000 beings from over 200 species filled the massive space. The ceiling displayed a slowly rotating view of the galaxy, and the scale of it made everyone feel small. Professor Crix Vallon stood at the center stage with Dr. Maria Chen beside her. The dog, Companion Unit 12, lay at Dr. Chen's feet with its head on its paws. Before we conclude our study of human persistence and adaptation, Professor Crix Vallon began, I would like to address some concerns that have been raised by students and faculty members. She paused, letting the auditorium quiet completely. Several of you have expressed fear about what you have learned. You have asked whether humans pose a threat to galactic civilization. You have questioned whether continued contact with their species is wise. Some have even suggested that they should be isolated completely. Dr. Chen stood very still, her expression carefully neutral. These are not unreasonable concerns, the professor continued. Humans are unlike any species we have encountered. They do not fit our models. They do not behave according to our predictions. They are, in many ways, an unknown quantity. She turned to face Dr. Chen directly. But I would like to offer a different perspective. Dr. Chen, in your time studying xenobiology, what has been the most important thing you have learned about other species? Dr. Chen thought for a moment. That fear is easy and understanding is hard. When you meet something different from yourself, the natural instinct is to be afraid. But fear doesn't lead anywhere good. It leads to conflict, to isolation, to stagnation. Understanding is harder. It requires effort and patience and a willingness to be wrong. But understanding leads to cooperation, to growth, to survival. She looked out at the thousands of students watching her. Humans are scary. I get it. We persist when we should give up. We adapt when we should accept our limitations. We bond with species that should be our prey and turn predators into companions. We look at impossible problems and see challenges instead of barriers. Everything about us probably seems threatening from the outside. She took a breath. But here's the thing. We're not hunting you. We never have been. Humans don't want to conquer the galaxy. We want to be part of it. We want to learn from you and share what we've learned. We want to form bonds with other species the way we've formed bonds with every species we've ever met. She gestured at the sleeping dog. 12,000 years ago, wolves were one of our most dangerous predators. They killed our children. They stole our food. They were our enemies. And look at what we did with them. We turned them into our best friends, our helpers, our family. She looked directly at Torx 9, who had asked so many skeptical questions throughout the unit. That's what we do. We don't destroy threats. We adapt to them. We find ways to turn enemies into allies, obstacles into opportunities. It's not just persistence. It's transformation. We transform ourselves and everything around us. Professor Crix Vallon stepped forward. This is the true lesson of this unit. Humans are apex predators, yes, but they are apex predators who have learned to extend their social bonds beyond their own species. They are apex predators who measure success not by what they have killed, but by what they have built. They are apex predators who have taken the most dangerous trait in evolution and pointed it toward creation instead of destruction. She brought up a series of images on the auditorium's display. Humans and aliens working together on joint research projects. Humans teaching their languages to other species. Humans sharing their art, their music, their stories with the galaxy. In the 300 cycles since first contact, humans have formed cooperative relationships with over 40 species. They have contributed to advances in medicine, engineering, and theoretical physics. They have shared their cultural traditions freely and adopted elements of other cultures with genuine enthusiasm. She paused. Have there been conflicts? Yes, humans are not perfect. They still carry the instincts of their predatory ancestors, and sometimes those instincts manifest in harmful ways, but they are aware of this. They work to control their nature, to channel it toward positive ends, and most importantly, they never stop trying to be better. A student in the back raised a tentacle. Professor, you speak of human nature as if it is something they can choose to express or suppress, but nature is nature. Can they really control what they are? Dr. Chen answered before the professor could speak. We've been controlling our nature for our entire existence. That's what civilization is. Every society, human or otherwise, is an attempt to channel natural impulses into productive directions. We have laws because we know humans can be violent. We have institutions because we know humans can be selfish. We have education because we know humans can be ignorant. We're not pretending our nature doesn't exist. We're constantly working to make sure our nature serves us instead of destroying us. She stood straighter, her voice growing stronger. And you know what? We're pretty good at it. Not perfect, but pretty good. We've taken the instinct to hunt and turned it into the drive to explore. We've taken the instinct to persist and turned it into the patience for scientific discovery. We've taken the instinct to bond with other species and turned it into the capacity for interstellar diplomacy. Professor Crix Vallon nodded slowly. This is the final lesson I want you to take from this unit. Human nature is not a threat to the galaxy. Human nature, properly understood and properly channeled, may be exactly what the galaxy needs. She let those words hang in the air. We face challenges that no single species can solve alone. We face problems that require new ways of thinking, new approaches, new persistence. Humans bring all of these things. They bring a willingness to attempt the impossible. They bring an ability to adapt to any environment. They bring a social nature that allows them to work with any species. She turned to face the entire auditorium. For too long, we have treated humans as something to be feared and contained. Perhaps it is time to treat them as what they truly are, partners in the great project of building a galactic civilization that can endure. Dr. Chen smiled, and for the first time it did not look unsettling. It looked hopeful. We're not asking you to trust us immediately, she said. Trust is earned, and we know we have a lot of earning to do, but we are asking you to give us a chance, to work with us, to let us show you that persistence and adaptation can be tools for building things up, not just for tearing things down. She looked down at the sleeping dog at her feet. Every relationship starts with one side reaching out. Thousands of years ago, a human offered food to a wolf. It was a risk. It could have gone badly, but it didn't. And now we have dogs, the most loyal companions any species could ask for. She looked back up at the thousands of students watching her. We're reaching out to you. We're offering our persistence, our adaptability, our willingness to bond with others. We're offering everything that makes us human. All we're asking is that you reach back. The auditorium was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, a sound began to build. It started with one student making the approval gesture of their species, then another, then another. Within seconds, the auditorium was filled with the sounds of 5,000 beings from 200 species expressing approval in 200 different ways. Professor Crix Vallon watched with her 4 eyes wide. In all her years of teaching, she had never seen a reaction quite like this. Dr. Chen stood at the center of the stage, the target of all that approval, and she did the most human thing possible. She cried. Tears rolled down her face even as she smiled. The dog at her feet woke up and pressed against her legs, sensing her emotion and offering comfort the way dogs had been offering comfort for thousands of generations. Later, after the auditorium had emptied and the displays had been shut down, Professor Crix Vallon found Torx 9 standing alone on the observation deck. The scaled student was staring out at the stars. "You have been very quiet," the professor said. Torx 9 turned his large eyes toward her. "I have been thinking about everything we learned, about humans, about what it means to be an apex predator." "And what conclusions have you reached?" "I think," Torx 9 said slowly, "that we have been looking at this question wrong. We kept asking, are humans dangerous? But that is not the right question." "What is the right question?" "The right question is, what are humans dangerous to?" Torx 9 said. "And I think the answer is, they are dangerous to any problem they decide to solve. They are dangerous to any obstacle they decide to overcome. They are dangerous to any limit they decide to exceed." He turned back to the stars. "If they decide that the limit they want to exceed is the one that keeps species apart, if they decide that the obstacle they want to overcome is mutual mistrust, if they decide that the problem they want to solve is loneliness in the universe," he trailed off. Professor Crix Vallon finished his thought. "Then nothing in the galaxy will be able to stop them from building connections." "Yes," Torx 9 said, "and I am beginning to think that is not something to fear. It is something to celebrate." High above them, the stars continued their slow dance through the darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars, on a small blue world circling an ordinary yellow sun, billions of humans were waking up to a new day. They would persist. They would adapt. They would reach out toward the universe with the same relentless determination their ancestors had shown when they first stepped out of the forests and began to run. And the universe, perhaps, was finally ready to reach back. 10 years had passed since Professor Crix Vallon first taught her famous unit on human persistence and adaptation. The Galactic Academy had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible back then. Walking through its corridors today, one could see the evidence of transformation everywhere. Human students now attended classes alongside beings from hundreds of other species. Human professors taught courses on persistent psychology and adaptive problem-solving. Human art decorated the walls, strange and beautiful images that other species found both disturbing and fascinating. Human music played in common areas, rhythms that somehow made bodies of all shapes want to move. But the biggest change was not visible. The biggest change was in how the galaxy thought about the future. Dr. Maria Chen, now Director Chen, stood in her office on the top floor of the Academy's new cooperative research wing. The wing had been built jointly by human and alien engineers, combining technologies from a dozen different worlds. It was a symbol of everything the past decade had achieved. On her desk sat a small frame containing a photograph. It showed a younger version of herself standing next to a large blue alien with 4 eyes. Professor Crix Vallon, who had retired 5 years ago to write her comprehensive study of human-alien relations. The book had become required reading across the galaxy. A chime announced a visitor. Chen looked up to see a familiar scaled figure entering her office. "Torx 9, she said warmly. "Or should I say Ambassador Torx 9. The Dravex diplomat made a gesture that was his species' equivalent of a humble shrug. "I am still getting used to the title. 10 years ago, I was a student who questioned whether humans should be studied at all. Now I represent my species in the Cooperative Council." "A lot has changed," Chen agreed. She gestured to a seat, and Torx 9 settled his large body into the specially designed chair. "That is actually why I have come," he said. "The Council has asked me to deliver a message personally. They felt it was important enough to require face-to-face communication." Chen felt a flutter of concern. Despite all the progress of the past decade, relations between species were still fragile. What kind of message? Torx 9's scales shifted to a color Chen had learned indicated deep emotion. "The Council has voted to reclassify Earth. It will no longer be designated a Category 7 restricted world." Chen stared at him. "What but that classification? It's been in place for over 300 years, since first contact. Exactly, Torx9 said. For 300 years, the galaxy has treated humans as a threat to be contained, but the evidence no longer supports that classification. Human-alien cooperation has produced more scientific advances in the past decade than in the previous century. Human diplomatic methods have resolved conflicts that festered for generations. Human persistence has been applied to problems that other species had given up on long ago. He leaned forward, his eyes meeting hers. The galaxy no longer sees humans as threats. The galaxy sees humans as partners, and the Council believes it is time for that change to be made official. Chen felt tears forming in her eyes, just as they had on that day in the auditorium 10 years ago. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, Torx9 advised. I have learned from humans that sometimes the best response to good news is simply to feel it. They sat in companionable silence for a moment. Outside the window, ships from dozens of worlds moved through the Academy's orbital station. Human ships flew alongside alien vessels in a dance of cooperation that would have seemed like fantasy just a generation ago. There is something else, Torx9 said finally, a personal matter. Of course, what is it? I have been offered a position at the Academy, a teaching position. They want me to co-teach a course on human-alien relations with a human partner. He paused. I was hoping you might be that partner. Chen laughed, a sound that Torx9 had learned to recognize as joy rather than mockery. You want to teach about humans, the student who questioned whether we should be studied at all. That is precisely why I want to do it, Torx9 said. I want to show students that understanding can replace fear, that beings who start as skeptics can become advocates, that the process of learning about others is really a process of learning about ourselves. Chen stood and walked to the window. The stars stretched out before her, countless points of light representing countless possibilities. Somewhere out there, her fellow humans were exploring, building, reaching out, being persistently, stubbornly, wonderfully human. Yes, she said softly, I would be honored to teach with you. Torx9 made the Dravex gesture of deep satisfaction. Then it is settled. We begin next cycle. Professor Crix Vallon has agreed to give a guest lecture for our opening session. Chen turned back to face him, surprised. I thought she had retired. She did, but she said there was one more lesson she wanted to teach, something about how the best way to understand apex predators is to watch them form unexpected alliances. His scales shifted to a color that indicated amusement. I believe she was referring to us. Chen looked at the photograph on her desk again. Herself and Crix Vallon, human and Valorian, predator and prey species by any biological definition. Yet here they were, connected by years of shared work and mutual respect. She always was a good teacher, Chen said. The Academy's announcement system chimed softly, and a synthesized voice spoke in dozens of languages simultaneously. Attention, all staff and students. The Earth reclassification ceremony will begin in 1 hour in the main auditorium. All are welcome to attend. Torx9 stood. We should go. I understand there will be speeches. Many speeches. Chen groaned. Humans love speeches. I hope you're prepared for that. After 10 years, I have adapted, Torx9 said. He paused at the door, his expression thoughtful. Do you know what I find most remarkable about humans? What's that? You persisted with us, even when we feared you, even when we tried to contain you, even when we questioned whether you should be part of our galaxy at all. You just kept reaching out, kept trying to connect, kept believing that eventually we would understand. He made the Dravex gesture of profound respect. That is what an apex predator looks like when it decides to hunt for friendship instead of prey. And I, for one, am glad you caught us. He left the office, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She picked up the photograph of herself and Crix Vallon and held it gently. Persistence and adaptation, the twin engines of human evolution, now turned toward a purpose greater than survival, toward building a galaxy where every species could flourish, toward creating bonds that would last for generations, toward proving that the most dangerous predator in the universe could also be the most loyal friend. Outside, the stars continued their eternal dance, and somewhere among them, the partnership between humans and the rest of the galaxy was just beginning to show what it could truly accomplish. The hunt was over. The building had begun,